An elderly man in Jerusalem hasn't missed a single sunrise walk in 60 years. Last Tuesday, he stopped dead on the path. A grandmother 6 blocks away woke up to the sound of water flowing where water has never flowed. A construction crew drilling routine repairs hit something their equipment wasn't supposed to find. A priest serving at the most sacred Christian site on earth walked into a room glowing with light that had no source. For people, for locations, same 72-hour window. And every single thing they witnessed matches, detail for detail. A prophecy written over 2,000 years ago about the final 30 days before everything changes. What they found is still being deleted, but not fast enough. His name is David, 83 years old, born in Jerusalem. Still lives in the same neighborhood where his mother brought him home from the hospital 8 decades ago. Every morning at 5 a.m., rain, heat, illness, grief, David laces up his shoes and walks the same path to the Mount of Olives to watch the sun rise over the city. He did it the morning after his wedding. He did it the morning after his wife's funeral. He has done it through wars, through sirens, through the kind of history that makes other cities famous and makes Jerusalem eternal. 60 years. Not one missed morning. Until last Tuesday, David's grandson gets a phone call at 3 in the morning. Not from an unknown number. From a man who has never once called past 9 p.m. in his entire life. The grandson, a Wall Street professional who hasn't been inside a house of worship in years, almost doesn't answer. Something makes him pick up. The voice on the other end is shaking. Not from age, not from confusion, from something the grandson has never heard in that voice before. Fear mixed with wonder, like a man who has just seen something that answered every question he ever had and opened 10 more he wasn't ready for. The mountain, the old man whispers. It's opening. The grandson thinks medical emergency. He starts asking questions. Is he hurt? Does he need an ambulance? But then the video comes through. 12 seconds. Shaky footage. Old phone camera. And what it shows stops the grandson completely. Now before going any further, because what that video contains connects directly to something that has been building beneath the surface of Jerusalem for longer than any living person has been watching. There is a question that needs to be asked first. What does it actually take for a man who has walked the same mountain path for 60 years to stop? Not slow down, not pause. Stop completely. Back up, pull out his phone with shaking hands and film something he has never seen in 6 decades of walking that exact route. The answer to that question is the same answer that sent 3 separate research teams to the same conclusion. The same answer that put religious leaders from faiths that rarely agree on anything into emergency sessions within hours of each other. The same answer that a construction foreman in Jerusalem tried to file in an official report and was told very quietly to rewrite. Something is moving beneath the Mount of Olives. Not settling, not shifting, moving, deliberately, in a direction and at a pace that matches nothing in any geological record for this region. And the crack that David filmed that Tuesday morning, that clean, straight line cutting east to west across ancient stone, is not getting smaller. It is getting wider. By the time David's grandson landed in Tel Aviv 36 hours later, it had grown from a hairline fracture to something you could see from 100 yards away. By the time this script was researched and written, 3 more things had been reported from that same hillside. Things that individually could be explained. Together they cannot. And the clock that scholars are now pointing to, the one that connects what is happening on that mountain to a specific window of time described in ancient texts. That clock does not have years on it. It does not have months. What David filmed that morning is just the beginning of what needs to be understood. Because the crack in the mountain is not the story. The crack in the mountain is the signal. And what it is signaling, that starts with what was found 6 feet below a routine construction site. Just 3 blocks from the most contested piece of ground on earth. 3 blocks from the Temple Mount. That is where it started for Mahmoud. 38 years in construction. Jerusalem born and raised. Has worked on roads, foundations, water lines, and ancient walls that most tourists walk past without a second glance. Mahmoud knows what is supposed to be underground in this city. He has the maps. He has the blueprints. He has decades of muscle memory telling him what his drill should hit and at what depth. Last Monday morning, his crew was running a routine job, replacing old water lines beneath a narrow street that has been repaired a dozen times since Mahmoud started in this trade. Nothing unusual, nothing that required special permits or archaeological oversight. Just a drill, a crew, and a job that should have been finished before lunch. The drill stopped at 10 feet. Not slowed down, not struggled. Stopped. Clean. Like it had hit a wall of solid steel. But the blueprints showed nothing there. No bedrock formation. No forgotten infrastructure. No previously logged obstruction of any kind. Empty space on paper. Something very different in the ground. Mahmoud pulled the crew off the drill and they went down by hand. 6 feet, 8 feet, 10. And then one of the younger workers hit something with his shovel that made a sound none of them had heard before. Not the dull thud of packed earth. Not the scrape of old pipe. A hollow sound. The sound of empty space behind cut stone. They kept digging. What they uncovered was a chamber. Not a utility tunnel. Not a forgotten basement. A chamber cut from solid rock with a precision that Mahmoud, 38 years in this trade, said he had never seen outside of the oldest sections of the old city. The stone was dressed, fitted, the kind of work that takes skilled hands and time that modern construction schedules do not allow for. And it was old, not decades old, not even centuries old in the way that word gets used casually. Old in the way that makes archaeologists go quiet and start measuring everything twice. But the chamber itself was not what stopped Mahmoud cold. It was what was inside it. Water, fresh water, clear water, cool to the touch in a chamber that should have been bone dry given its depth and location. And the water was not pooling. It was not seeping in from a broken pipe above. It was moving, upward, against gravity, against every physical principle that 38 years of working underground had taught Mahmoud to expect. Fresh water rising from somewhere deeper. Somewhere that the maps did not account for. Somewhere that the blueprints had never been drawn. Mahmoud sealed the chamber that afternoon, filed the report that evening, was called into his supervisor's office the following morning and told very calmly, very specifically, to amend his language. Not to remove the finding entirely, just to describe it differently. Words like chamber were replaced with words like cavity. Words like flowing were replaced with words like moisture present. Mahmoud signed the amended report. Then he called his brother, and his brother called someone else. And within 48 hours, what was discovered beneath that street had traveled through WhatsApp groups and family phone chains across 3 continents before a single news organization had printed one word about it. Because here is what Mahmoud's brother knew that the amended report did not say. The location of that chamber sits directly beneath a line that biblical scholars have been tracking for decades. A line described in the book of Ezekiel. A vision of water, fresh, living water, flowing eastward from beneath the sacred mount, starting as a trickle, growing into something that could not be contained. Ezekiel described that water with specific directional language that scholars argued about for generations. Was it symbolic? Was it architectural? Was it a future physical reality describing something that had not yet happened? The argument stopped being purely academic the morning Mahmoud's drill hit cut stone at 10 feet below a routine repair job. Now here is where it gets harder to explain away. Within 24 hours of Mahmoud's discovery, 3 separate individuals in different parts of Jerusalem reported water appearing in places where no water source existed. A woman who has lived in the same apartment for 40 years found a thin stream of clear water moving across her courtyard stones at 4 in the morning. Not from a broken pipe. The building's superintendent checked everything twice. A night security guard at a facility near the old city walls reported water seeping through stone in a section of wall that engineers had waterproofed and sealed 18 months prior. A young student walking home before dawn stepped into a puddle in the middle of a street that had been completely dry when she passed the same spot 2 hours earlier. 3 locations. No connecting infrastructure. No common water source that any engineer called to investigate could identify. And all 3 locations fall on the same directional line. The same line that runs east from the Temple Mount. The same line Ezekiel described. By Wednesday morning, the water was no longer something that could be managed quietly. It was finding new pathways through stone that had been sealed for generations. Moving through the oldest sections of the city with a persistence that one engineer, speaking privately and not for any official record, described as intentional. As if it knows where it is going. Those were his words. Not a preacher, not a prophecy scholar, a civil engineer with 25 years of experience in underground water management, as if it knows where it is going. And while the water was finding its way through the oldest streets of Jerusalem, on the hill directly east of the city, David was back on his path, walking slower now, stopping more, filming things he had never filmed in 60 years of walking the same route. Because the crack he had filmed on Tuesday morning was not the same crack he was looking at on Wednesday afternoon. It was wider, it was longer, and it was revealing something beneath the surface of the Mount of Olives that no amount of amended reports or carefully chosen language was going to be able to describe away. Ancient stones, cut stone, fitted stone, the same quality of craftsmanship that Mahmud had found 10 feet underground 3 blocks from the Temple Mount. But these stones were not underground. They were being revealed by the widening crack, pushed upward, exposed to daylight for what appeared to be the first time in an era that predated every living person's memory. And between the stones, chambers, dark openings descending into the mountain, spaces that the light of a phone camera could not reach the bottom of. David filmed everything. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from recognition. Because David has spent 60 years walking this mountain and 47 of those years listening to his wife read from the ancient texts every night before sleep. And what he was looking at, the cut stone, the direction of the crack, the chambers opening toward the city. He had heard this described before, in a voice he would never hear again in this life, reading by lamplight from a worn Bible with marked pages. But David did not yet know what those chambers contained. That discovery would come the following morning. And when it did, it would not just change what David understood about what he was witnessing. It would change what 2,000 years of scholarship had assumed about a specific prophecy that most theologians believed was still centuries away from fulfillment. What was inside those chambers has no natural explanation. None. And the man who first documented it has not slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since. Thursday morning, 5 a.m. David is on the path. The crack is now visible from the road below. A clean line cutting east to west across the ancient slope like something drew it with a ruler. 200 feet long, in places nearly 4 feet wide. And it is still moving. Not dramatically, not with the violence of an earthquake. Slowly, deliberately, the way a door opens when someone on the other side has decided it is time. David has brought a notebook this time. He has been writing down measurements, timestamps, observations, the same discipline that kept him walking this path through 6 decades of Middle Eastern history, now keeping his hands steady enough to document what his eyes are struggling to process. He kneels at the widest point of the crack and looks down. What he sees stops the pen in his hand. Steps, ancient stone steps, descending into the mountain. Not rubble, not collapsed earth shaped to resemble steps. Deliberate construction, evenly spaced, wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. Steps that have clearly not seen direct sunlight since an era that none of David's 60 years on this mountain had ever touched. He counts what he can see from ground level. 14 steps before the darkness takes over. Then he does something that surprises even himself. He starts going down. Now this is the part that the people who want this story to stay quiet find most difficult to address. Because David is not alone on the mountain at this hour. There are 3 other early walkers within eyesight. All of them see him descend. All of them follow at a distance. And all of them, a retired schoolteacher, a young seminary student, and a baker who starts his day before dawn, later give independent accounts of what happened next. Accounts that match each other in every significant detail. The air inside the upper chamber is different. Not cold the way underground spaces are cold. Not stale the way sealed spaces smell after years without circulation. Fresh. The kind of air that moves. That carries something. David describes it later as the way air smells just before rain in the desert. Clean. Charged. Like something is about to happen. The chamber walls are cut stone. Same craftsmanship as the exterior. Same era. 1st century construction at minimum, possibly older. And on the floor of the chamber, water. The same water that Mahmud found beneath the street 3 blocks from the Temple Mount. Moving. Not pooling. Not seeping. Flowing. In a thin, steady current across the stone floor heading in a direction that, when David later describes it to a geologist friend, points directly back toward the Temple Mount. The same direction Ezekiel described. The same direction the water beneath the street was flowing. Connected. Underground. Moving through the oldest bedrock in one of the oldest cities on Earth, as if following a route that was laid out long before any modern map was drawn. The retired schoolteacher who followed David down. Her name is Ruth, later tells her daughter in a phone call that will be shared across 3 continents within 48 hours, that she knelt down and touched the water, and that her hands, Arthritic for 11 years, swollen every morning since her early 50s. Stopped hurting. Not gradually. Not over days. Immediately. The moment her fingers touched the surface of the water moving across the stone floor of that ancient chamber. Ruth is not a dramatic woman by nature. Her daughter confirms this. Her doctor, who she calls that same afternoon, confirms this when she describes what happened, and he compares it to her last examination 3 weeks prior. He has no explanation. He writes nothing in her file. The seminary student who descended behind them, 22 years old, studying ancient Hebrew texts, recognizes something on the chamber walls. Not hieroglyphs, not symbols, words. Hebrew words carved into the stone with the same precision as the construction itself. He photographs everything before the light on his phone begins to dim. Later, working with 2 professors at his institution who agree to review the images under strict confidentiality, the words are identified as a passage, not from a common liturgical text, not from a widely studied scripture portion, from a section of ancient writing that scholars have debated for generations about whether it describes a past event or a future one, a section that describes water and stone, and a door that opens when the time has come. The 2 professors disagree about the implications, but neither of them disagrees about the translation. Both of them, independently, use the same word when asked what they believe they are looking at: preparation. By Thursday afternoon, the crack on the Mount of Olives has been photographed by dozens of people. Videos are circulating through private channels faster than any algorithm can manage them. And the questions being asked in those private channels, by ordinary people, by clergy, by academics who would never say these things in a formal setting, are no longer questions about geology or hydrology or ancient construction methods. They are questions about timing. Specifically, why now? Why this week? Why this year? Why this particular convergence of water and stone and opened earth in this specific location at this specific moment in a world that is already stretched to breaking point in a dozen other directions? The answer to that question comes from the least expected source, not from a religious leader, not from a prophecy scholar, from a retired intelligence analyst who spent 22 years tracking regional patterns in the Middle East and who contacts a journalist friend on Thursday evening after seeing the circulating videos. His message is 4 sentences long. The first 3 sentences describe what he recognizes in the pattern of events. The 4th sentence is the one that the journalist screenshots and sends to 6 different people before midnight. It reads, "The last time this combination of indicators appeared in this region simultaneously was documented in historical records approximately 2,000 years ago. I am not a religious man, but I know a convergence pattern when I see one. Someone needs to start counting days. Someone needs to start counting days." That message reaches David's grandson, still in New York at this point, still processing the video his grandfather sent, still fighting the rational part of his brain that wants to find a geological explanation for a crack that is following a 2,000-year-old prophetic blueprint. At 2:47 in the morning, he books a flight to Tel Aviv 40 minutes later. But while he is in the air, while the water is moving through ancient stone beneath Jerusalem, while Ruth's hands remain pain-free for the first time in 11 years, something else is happening. Something that no geological survey and no intelligence analysis and no ancient chamber inscription had prepared anyone for. At the church containing the tomb of Christ, in a room that was locked, sealed, and confirmed empty by the last priest to check it before midnight, light appears, not from a candle, not from an electrical source, from the stone itself. And the priest who discovers it at 11 p.m. on Thursday night does not leave the room for 4 hours. When he finally emerges, his face has changed in a way that the other priests who see him cannot name, but all of them notice. What he witnessed in that room, what he describes to his bishop in a call that lasts until 3 in the morning. That is what turns this from a story about unusual events in one city into something that every government on earth will be tracking by Friday morning. Professor Alan Marsh has spent 30 years studying one question, not as a hobby, not as a side interest between other academic work, as the singular focus of a career that has produced 11 published books, hundreds of peer-reviewed papers, and a reputation in biblical archaeology that his colleagues describe, sometimes with admiration and sometimes with something closer to envy, as unmatched in the English-speaking world. The question he has spent 30 years on is this: are the end times prophecies of the ancient texts literal descriptions of physical events? Or are they symbolic language describing spiritual realities that have no geographic address? For most of his career, Marsh has held the careful academic position of deliberate ambiguity, meaning he has never publicly committed to either answer. It is the safest position for a man whose work depends on institutional credibility. It is also, as Marsh will later admit in a recorded conversation that was not meant for public distribution, the position of a man who privately suspected one answer but could not yet point to physical evidence sufficient to say it out loud. Until Friday morning, Marsh receives 3 separate communications before 7 a.m. The first is from a colleague at a university in Jerusalem who has reviewed photographs of the chamber inscriptions found by the seminary student. The second is from a geologist he has collaborated with twice before who has been analyzing the crack formation data from the Mount of Olives overnight. The third is from a source he will not name publicly, someone with access to information that does not move through normal academic channels, who sends him a file that Marsh later describes as the most significant document he has seen in 30 years of research. All 3 communications arrive within 90 minutes of each other. All 3 point to the same conclusion. Marsh sits at his desk for a long time after reading the third one. Then he calls his assistant and cancels everything on his calendar for the next 2 weeks. What the geologist tells him first. The crack formation on the Mount of Olives is not consistent with any natural seismic or geological process on record for this region. Not because crack formations are unusual. They are not. Not because the Mount of Olives sits in a seismically inactive zone. It does not. But because of the direction. The crack is running east to west with a precision, a geometrical exactness, that no natural process produces. Natural fault lines follow the path of least resistance through existing rock structures. They curve, they deviate, they follow weaknesses in the stone that have built up over geological time. This crack does not curve. It does not deviate. It runs east to west in a line so straight that the geologist, in a note to Marsh that he later says he would not have sent to anyone he trusted less, writes that it appears to have been drawn from the outside, as if the direction was chosen before the cracking began. As if something decided where the line would fall before the stone started to move. The chamber inscriptions tell a different part of the same story. The colleague in Jerusalem has worked with 3 other scholars overnight to complete a full translation of every word photographed by the seminary student. The inscription is not a prayer. It is not a dedication or a memorial or a record of construction. It is a description, written in a form of Hebrew that the scholars date. With a margin of uncertainty they freely acknowledge but cannot narrow further to somewhere between the 1st century before and the 1st century after the Common Era. A description of what this chamber is for, what it is waiting for, what will happen when the water rises to the 2nd step from the bottom. Marsh asks his colleague immediately, "How high is the water currently?" The colleague pauses before answering. The pause lasts long enough that Marsh already knows what the answer is going to be before he hears it. 3rd step from the bottom, the colleague says quietly. It rose past the 2nd step sometime overnight. Now this is where Marsh's 30 years of careful academic ambiguity ends. Because the file sent by his unnamed source contains something that the academic world has not had access to until this week. Survey data, ground-penetrating radar imaging, subsurface mapping of the Mount of Olives conducted as part of an infrastructure study that was commissioned, completed, and then classified before its findings could be published. Marsh cannot say who commissioned the study. He cannot say who classified it or why. What he can say, and what he does say in the recorded conversation that was not meant for public distribution, is that the subsurface mapping shows a network of chambers beneath the Mount of Olives that extends far deeper and far wider than any previously documented archaeological record suggests. A network that connects, underground, to the area beneath the Temple Mount. A network that the crack on the surface is beginning to expose from the top down. And a network that the inscriptions in the 1st chamber describe as having a purpose. A specific, literal, physical purpose that was built in anticipation of a specific moment. A moment described in the ancient texts with enough precision that Marsh, 30 years of deliberate ambiguity ending in one Friday morning, can no longer pretend requires symbolic interpretation. He calls his closest colleague, a woman named Dr. Sarah Okafor, who holds a chair in eschatological studies at a seminary in Virginia and who has disagreed with Marsh's ambiguity position for the better part of a decade. When he tells her what he has received, she is quiet for a moment. Then she says something that Marsh records, with her knowledge, because he wants to make sure he has it accurately. "Alan," she says, "I have been waiting for you to call me about something like this for 15 years. The question is not what it means. The question is how much time is left before the next phase begins." How much time? Marsh pulls out the subsurface mapping data again, looks at the rate of change in the crack formation over the past 72 hours, cross-references it with the water level data from the chamber, runs the progression forward. He arrives at a number. He checks it twice. Then he calls Dr. Okafor back. 30 days, he tells her. Give or take a week on either side. But if the rate holds. 30 days, she repeats. Neither of them speaks for several seconds. Then Dr. Okafor says, "Then we need to talk about what happens at the end of 30 days. Because Alan, that part of the prophecy is the part nobody has been willing to discuss in public. Nobody has been willing to discuss it because nobody believed it would be literal. But if the water is at the third step." She stops. Marsh waits. "If the water is at the third step, then the part that comes after. Alan, that part has never been symbolic. That part has always been exactly what it says it is. What Dr. Okafor is referring to. What the ancient inscription describes happening when the water reaches the fourth step. That is the piece of this story that religious leaders from 3 separate faiths will spend the next 48 hours meeting in emergency session to discuss. And the conclusion they reach will not be made public through any official channel. It will leak. The way things always leak when the people holding information realize that keeping it private is no longer an act of caution, but an act of fear. Friday afternoon, David's grandson lands in Tel Aviv. His name is not important for this story. What is important is what he represents. A generation that was raised on faith by grandparents who meant every word of it and then walked away. Not in anger, not in rebellion, just in the gradual drift that happens when ancient certainty meets modern complexity and the modern world wins on points. He has not prayed in years. He is not sure he believes in the God his grandfather talks to every morning before sunrise. But he booked a flight at 3 in the morning because something in his grandfather's voice at 3 a.m. felt like a message he could not ignore. And that instinct, that pull he cannot name or explain, is about to be confirmed in a way that no amount of Wall Street rationalism is going to be able to process. His grandfather meets him outside the terminal, 83 years old, standing straight, eyes clear, holding a notebook that is already half full of observations, measurements, and timestamps from 5 days of walking a mountain that is no longer the same mountain it was when the week began. They drive to Jerusalem without talking much. The grandson is exhausted. The grandfather is somewhere else entirely, looking out the window at a landscape he has known his whole life as if he is seeing it for the first time. When they arrive at the apartment, the grandson finally asks the question he has been holding since the phone call 4 days ago. "Grandpa, what do you actually think is happening?" David sets the notebook on the table, opens it to the first page. "I think," he says slowly, "that the mountain is preparing." For what? For someone to walk across it. That conversation happens at approximately the same time that Dr. Okafor's warning about what follows the fourth step begins circulating through private channels in the academic and religious community. And it happens at the same time that something new is being reported from locations that have nothing to do with Jerusalem. This is the part of the story where the geography expands. And when geography expands like this, when the same phenomenon begins appearing in locations that share nothing except an entry in the ancient texts, that is when even the most disciplined skeptics start paying attention. Rome, Thursday night into Friday morning. A team of restoration workers operating under permit in the lower levels of the Vatican's historic district report an acoustic phenomenon that their project supervisor describes in a formal complaint as incompatible with the known properties of the space. Voices coming from below the lowest level of the accessible structure. Not mechanical, not recorded, live human voices, singing in a language that one worker, a classics graduate doing seasonal restoration work, identifies as early Latin mixed with something older. The complaint is logged. The work is paused. The supervisor is asked to submit to a secondary review of the structural assessment. The workers go home. The singing does not stop. Istanbul, same window. A mosque built on the site of one of the oldest continuously active places of worship in the city reports an unexplained phenomenon during the early morning call to prayer. The imam leading the prayer stops mid-recitation. Not from illness, not from distraction, because beneath the floor of the mosque, beneath stone that has not been opened since the original construction was assessed 3 generations ago, something is resonating, a vibration that the imam, 40 years of leading prayer in this building, has never felt before. Rhythmic, steady, like a pulse. He finishes the prayer. Afterwards, he sits with 2 senior members of the community and they discuss what he felt. One of the senior members is a structural engineer. He has no explanation for a rhythmic subsurface vibration beneath a building that sits on solid stone foundation with no mechanical systems beneath it. He recommends a ground survey. The survey is scheduled. Before it can be conducted, the vibration stops, and something else begins. Canterbury, England. Friday morning. The head of maintenance at one of the oldest cathedrals in the English-speaking world files an incident report about standing water that appeared overnight in the crypt. Not flooding, not pipe failure, not groundwater intrusion consistent with any weather event. Clear water, shallow, covering the stone floor of the oldest section of the crypt in a thin, even layer. With no identifiable source, the water is tested. The results come back in a category that the testing laboratory flags for secondary review because the mineral composition does not match any known local water source or any regional water source, or, according to the hydrogeologist who reviews the secondary sample, any water source currently mapped in the British Isles. Now here is the pattern that Professor Marsh and Dr. Okafor spend Friday afternoon documenting, because they are not the only scholars tracking these reports. A loose network of researchers, some academic, some independent, some operating within religious institutions that have their own reasons for monitoring these things quietly, has been compiling location data since Thursday night. By Friday at 4 p.m. the list includes 27 locations across 14 countries, all reporting phenomena within the same 72-hour window. All phenomena falling into one of 3 categories. Water appearing from unknown sources in ancient sacred spaces. Acoustic phenomena, voices, vibration, harmonic sound, emanating from beneath the ground in locations with documented ancient religious significance. Light, appearing in sealed or locked spaces, without identifiable source. 27 locations, 14 countries, 3 categories, and every single location sits on a line. Not a metaphorical line, not a symbolic connection. A physical geographic line that, when plotted on a map, traces an ancient route that biblical scholars have written about for generations. A route described in the texts as the path along which sacred presence moves through the earth. Marsh plots the last data point and sits back. Dr. Okafor is on the phone with him. It's a network, Marsh says. It was always a network, she replies. We just didn't have the data density to see it before now. Why now? Why are we seeing it now? She is quiet for a moment. Because it's activating, she says. The network isn't new. The activity is new. Something triggered it. Jerusalem triggered it, Marsh says. Jerusalem is the center of it, she corrects him. Jerusalem is where the signal originates. Everything else is response. Everything else is the rest of the network waking up because the center moved first. Marsh looks at his map. 27 points of light across 14 countries. All connected. All responding. All part of something that was apparently always there, waiting for the center to move. Alan, Dr. Okafor says, if Jerusalem is the signal source and everything else is response, then the next movement in Jerusalem isn't a local event. It's a global one. Whatever happens next on that mountain, the whole network responds. At the same time, David's grandson is standing on the Mount of Olives when his phone buzzes with a message from a colleague back in New York. The colleague has been following the story through the grandson's social media updates. The message says, my grandmother in Louisiana is talking about a dream she had last night. She's never been to Jerusalem, never studied prophecy, but she described the crack in the mountain in exact detail before I showed her any of your videos. Exact detail, down to the steps leading underground. How is that possible? The grandson reads the message, looks down at the crack in the mountain beneath his feet, looks at the steps descending into the chamber, looks at his grandfather standing 20 feet away writing in the notebook with steady hands. He does not have an answer for his colleague, but something in the back of his mind, the part that booked a flight at 3 in the morning based on an instinct he could not name, that part is starting to understand something that the rational part is not ready to accept yet. This was never just about Jerusalem. This was always about everyone. and the 30-day window that Marsh calculated from the water level data is not a countdown to something that happens in one city. It is a countdown to something that happens everywhere at once. What that something is, what the ancient inscription says follows the water reaching the fourth step. That is what the emergency meetings between religious leaders will spend the next 12 hours trying to decide whether to announce publicly or whether to stay quiet and let the 30 days run out in silence. They will not stay quiet, but the reason they break silence is not the reason anyone expects. Saturday morning, the emergency meetings have been running through the night. Not one meeting, three, in 3 different cities, 3 different faiths, 3 different sets of ancient texts being cross-referenced against the same accumulating body of evidence. None of the 3 groups knows the others are meeting. They will find out by noon. And when they do, the response from all 3 groups is the same: silence. Then one question: what did they conclude? The first meeting is in Jerusalem, a gathering of senior rabbinical scholars who have been tracking the Mount of Olives events since David's initial footage began circulating. They are not a formal body. They do not have a name or an institutional address. They are simply men who have spent their lives in the same texts and who began calling each other on Tuesday when the first reports surfaced. By Saturday morning, they have been studying for 4 days. Their conclusion is not unanimous, but the majority position, held by 7 of the 11 men present, is that what is happening on the Mount of Olives matches the prophetic prerequisites described in the texts with a specificity that cannot be attributed to coincidence. The dissenting 4 do not disagree on the evidence. They disagree on the timing. Their argument is that the fulfillment cannot be this soon, that there are steps that must precede this moment, that the sequence is not complete. The majority position answers this argument with a question of its own. How do you know the steps you believe must precede this moment have not already occurred? In forms we did not recognize because we were looking for what we expected rather than what was actually there. The dissenting 4 have no answer. The meeting continues. The second meeting is in Rome. A group of senior theologians and 1 retired cardinal who specifically requested that no record of the meeting be kept. No record was kept officially, but one of the younger scholars present, a man in his late 30s who has spent his career studying the intersection of archaeology and eschatology, keeps personal notes, and those notes describe a conversation that begins with the reports from the crypt and ends somewhere that none of the participants expected to arrive when they sat down. The retired cardinal, 81 years old, present at 3 papal conclaves, a man who has seen more institutional history than most, speaks last. He says that in 47 years of theological study and ecclesiastical service, he has never allowed himself to say what he is about to say. He says it anyway. The Church has always taught that these events would come. We have taught it as certainty while privately treating it as distance, as something real but remote, something true but not immediate. I no longer believe it is distant. I believe we are being shown the edge of it. And I believe the reason we are being shown the edge is so that those with eyes to see can prepare those who do not yet know what is coming. He asks for a moment of prayer before the meeting concludes. Every person in the room, scholars, theologians, a retired cardinal who has navigated 50 years of careful institutional language, kneels. The third meeting is the one that surprises everyone who learns of it, because the third meeting is not in a religious institution. It is in a hotel conference room in Amman, Jordan, and the people present are not clergy. They are a combination of Islamic scholars, regional historians, and 2 men whose professional backgrounds are in intelligence analysis and who asked to attend as observers. The Islamic scholarly tradition has its own extensive body of literature on end-time signs. Signs that, the scholars present note with increasing unease as the meeting progresses, are not entirely different from what the rabbinical scholars in Jerusalem and the theologians in Rome are looking at. Different language, different names, different cultural and textual framework, but the same underlying geography, the same underlying sequence, the same underlying timeline. One of the intelligence analysts, the one who has spent more years in this region than the other, makes a note on his pad during the meeting that he later shares with a journalist contact. The note says, 3 faiths, 3 separate traditions, independently arriving at the same sequence of events, the same geographic center, and the same approximate time frame. In 22 years of regional analysis, I have never seen this. Not even close. This is not a religious convergence. This is an intelligence pattern. And intelligence patterns like this mean one thing. Something is actually happening. The 3 meetings break up within 2 hours of each other on Saturday morning, within 4 hours of the last one ending. Someone in each group has reached out to someone in one of the other groups. Not officially, not through institutional channels, through the same private networks that have been circulating footage of the crack in the mountain since Tuesday. And by Saturday afternoon, all 3 groups know that the others exist, know that the others met, know that the others reached conclusions they did not expect to reach when they sat down, and know that the conclusions, across 3 faiths, 3 cities, 3 entirely separate bodies of ancient text, point to the same window, the same 30 days, the same sequence of events waiting to unfold. David's grandson is live streaming from the Mount of Olives when the first comments confirming the meetings begin to appear. His stream has been growing all week. What started as personal documentation for family and friends has become something that people are forwarding to each other across denominations and belief systems and national borders. Because what he is filming, the crack, the water, the steps descending into the mountain, the quality of light on the stone in the late afternoon, something about it is landing differently than most prophetic content lands. It is not dramatic. It is not performed. It is simply a young man who came to Jerusalem because his grandfather called at 3 in the morning, standing on a mountain that is changing, holding a phone with steady hands, filming what is actually there. And people are watching because they can feel the difference between content that is selling them something and a witness who is simply telling the truth about what he sees. The comment that stops him mid-sentence comes from a username he does not recognize. It reads, "I am a physician in Nairobi. I have been following your stream for 3 days. This morning, 6 patients in my ward who have been bedridden for months asked to get up and walk. Not metaphorically, literally, got up, walked. I have no medical explanation. I am not a religious man, but I am watching your stream and I am asking, what is happening and how much time do we have?" He reads the comment aloud without thinking, then looks up from the phone, then looks at his grandfather. David is already looking at him. "How much time?" the grandson says, not asking, just saying the words. David opens the notebook, points to a calculation he has been working on for 2 days, based not on academic data or subsurface mapping, based on 60 years of watching the same mountain change, and knowing with the certainty of someone who has walked the same path every morning for 6 decades, how fast this particular change is moving. 28 days, David says. Maybe 30, but not more than 30. The grandson looks back at the phone, at the comment from Nairobi, at the hundreds of other comments flowing beneath it from people in Lagos and London and Manila and Sao Paulo, all describing things that have no explanation, all connected to the same window, all pointing to the same closing door. He keeps filming, because whatever is coming, whatever the 30 days ends with, the world needs people who were there from the beginning, people who documented not just the signs, but the moment the signs became undeniable. That moment is almost here, and what happens when it arrives is what David has been preparing his grandson for since the phone call that started all of this, without either of them knowing it. Sunday, pre-dawn. David is on the path before the sun. The notebook is in his coat pocket. The phone is charged. The crack in the mountain is exactly where it was when he left it yesterday evening, but wider, measurably, visibly wider in the 12 hours since he last stood at this spot. He does not go back to the steps immediately. He sits on the low stone wall at the edge of the path and watches the eastern sky, the same way he has watched it for 60 years, waiting for the first light. But this morning, for the first time in 6 decades of sunrise watching, the light does not come from the east alone. There is a secondary source. Below, it is subtle at first, the kind of thing you would miss if you were not sitting still in complete pre-dawn darkness with 60 years of familiarity with exactly how this hillside looks before the sun arrives. A soft luminescence rising from the crack in the stone, not electric, not reflective, originating from somewhere in the chamber system below, rising through the crack the way heat rises from warm ground on a cold morning. Visible only because the sky above is still dark enough to provide contrast. David does not move for 11 minutes. He times it. He simply watches. Then he writes 3 words in the notebook. It is ready. By the time his grandson arrives at 7 a.m., the sun is up and the luminescence from below is no longer visible in daylight. But the crack has changed again overnight. Not just wider, different. The edges of the crack, which for the first several days showed the rough, irregular surface of freshly fractured stone, are smooth, as if the stone on either side has been finished, dressed, worked by hands that knew exactly what they were doing. The grandson runs his hand along the edge, looks at his grandfather. "Grandpa, stone doesn't smooth itself." David nods. "No," he says, "it doesn't." What they find when they descend to the chamber that morning adds a dimension to this story that no geological survey and no academic analysis had prepared either of them for. The chamber is larger, not marginally larger, significantly larger than it was when David first descended on Thursday. The walls have not moved. The stone has not been excavated, but the space is larger, as if the chamber itself has expanded to accommodate something or someone. And the water that was at the third step from the bottom on Friday morning when Marsh's colleague measured it, has receded, not drained, not evaporated, receded deliberately, pulled back to reveal the lower portion of the chamber floor. A floor that, now visible for the first time, is not bare stone. The floor is inscribed, not in the same style as the wall inscription found by the seminary student. Something different, something older, something that the grandson photographs from every angle before either of them speaks. A map, not symbolic, not abstract, a physical map of the chamber network beneath the Mount of Olives, carved into the floor with precision that suggests the person who made it had complete knowledge of the entire system. Passage by passage, chamber by chamber, depth markings that correspond, when the grandson later overlays them on Marsh's subsurface mapping data, with the ground-penetrating radar imaging almost exactly. A map that was carved into this floor at a point in history that predates ground-penetrating radar by approximately 2,000 years, showing a network of passages and chambers that the radar only confirmed existed 3 days ago. There is something else on the floor, at the center of the map, at the point where all the passages converge, a marking that neither David nor his grandson can immediately interpret. Not a word, not a symbol from any writing system either of them recognizes. A shape, simple, clean, the kind of mark that communicates across language barriers because it does not use language at all. A door, an outline of a door at the convergence point of the entire underground network, with one additional marking beside it. A number, carved in ancient Hebrew numerals that David, 47 years of evening Bible readings giving him more practical knowledge of ancient Hebrew than most people his age, translates without needing to call anyone. He reads it twice. Then he sits down on the chamber floor. His grandson asks what it says. David looks up. 30, he says. It says 30. The grandson calls Professor Marsh before they leave the chamber. Marsh is already awake, already working, already on his 4th hour of cross-referencing the global report data with the ancient textual sources. He listens to the description of the map, the receded water, the smooth stone edges, the door marking at the convergence point. He asks one question, the number beside the door. Is it 30 as an account or 30 as in a measurement? The grandson describes the carving again in detail. Marsh is quiet for a moment. It's a count, he says finally. It's counting down. And if the water receded overnight to reveal it. He stops. Professor, the grandson says. What does that mean? It means the count started, Marsh says. It means whatever this network was built to facilitate, whatever that door at the center is meant to open. The preparation phase is ending. The active phase is beginning. And someone, something, wanted whoever descended into that chamber this morning to know exactly how many days remain. The grandson ends the call, looks at his grandfather sitting on the chamber floor with the notebook open on his knee. David is writing steadily, documenting everything. The map, the measurements, the number beside the door. The same discipline that kept him walking this path for 60 years, keeping his hand steady now. Grandpa, the grandson says. Are you scared? David finishes the line he is writing before he answers. No, he says. Why not? David looks at the map on the floor, at the door marking at the center, at the number carved beside it. Because your grandmother read me the end of the story every night for 47 years, he says. And I know how it ends. But what about the 30 days? What happens at the end of 30 days? David closes the notebook, stands up, looks at the steps leading back toward the surface. The door opens, he says simply. And what comes through it? He starts up the steps. That is what every prophet who ever lived was trying to describe. And none of them. He pauses on the 4th step, the one that was underwater 2 days ago. None of them found words big enough. They emerge into Sunday morning sunlight. The city spread out below them, the Temple Mount visible in the middle distance. The golden light of a Jerusalem morning doing what it has done every morning for thousands of years. The grandson stands at the top of the steps and looks at the city, tries to hold in his mind simultaneously the mundane reality of traffic and shops opening and people starting their Sunday, and the chamber floor below him with its map and its door and its number carved in stone 2,000 years ago. The tension between those two realities. The ordinary world continuing on the surface, and something ancient and enormous waking up below it. That tension is about to resolve, because as they stand at the top of the steps in the Sunday morning light, the grandson's phone buzzes with a message from Dr. Okafor. For words, check the sky tonight. He does not know yet what she has seen. He does not know yet what is being reported from observation points across the northern hemisphere as of Saturday night. He does not know yet that what is coming in the sky above Jerusalem tonight will make everything that has happened underground look like preparation, which, as David has been writing in his notebook since Thursday, is exactly what it is. Sunday, 9:47 p.m., Jerusalem time. Every light in the city flickers. Not a power surge. The grid monitors show nothing. Every electrical engineer who checks the logs in the hour that follows finds the same thing. Normal readings on either side of the flicker. Nothing in between. As if the flicker did not come from the grid. As if it came from somewhere else entirely. And then, 3 minutes after the flicker, the sky changes. It does not change dramatically. Not at first. The stars are still visible. The familiar constellation patterns of a clear Jerusalem night still in their places. But the quality of the darkness between the stars is different. Not darker, lighter. As if the space between the stars, the black background of the night sky that has looked the same from this city for as long as anyone has been looking up, has a depth to it now that it did not have an hour ago. Like looking at a door that is slightly ajar, where before there was only wall. David and his grandson are on the balcony of the apartment. David saw this moment coming. Not because of the data, not because of the academic analysis, because of 60 years of watching this particular sky, and because he woke at 9 p.m. from a deep sleep with a certainty that he needed to be outside. He was on the balcony before the flicker. His grandson joins him 2 minutes after it. They stand side by side and watch the sky do something that neither of them has language for. The light begins at the horizon above the Mount of Olives. Soft at first, the kind of glow you might attribute to a distant city reflecting off low clouds. Except there are no clouds, and the closest city in that direction is not close enough to produce this. The glow rises slowly, not the way artificial light rises, not spreading outward from a point, descending from above downward, as if something above the visible atmosphere is generating light and that light is finding its way through. Through what? That is the question that will occupy physicists and astronomers and atmospheric scientists for weeks afterward. Through what? The grandson's phone is already recording. His stream has 12,000 viewers when the light begins. Within 20 minutes, it has 90,000. Comments are coming in faster than any human being could read them. But one category of comment appears again and again from viewers across different continents and time zones. I can see it from here. London, Lagos, Manila, Buenos Aires, Seoul. Not the same light at the same intensity. Not a single visible phenomenon spanning the globe. But something in the sky. Something in the quality of the night. Something that people and places that share no geography, no weather system, no atmospheric conditions, are all noticing at the same time. And all describing with the same word. Different languages. Same word. Alive. The sky feels alive. At 10:18 p.m. the light above the Mount of Olives intensifies. Not gradually this time. A step change. A threshold crossed. And with the increase in light comes something else. Sound. Not thunder. Not mechanical. Not anything in the standard catalog of identifiable atmospheric acoustics. A tone. Single. Pure. Sustained. Coming from above. The grandson holds his phone up toward the sky and the audio recording captures it clearly. When that recording is later analyzed by acoustic engineers who have no context for what they are hearing, the frequency matches nothing in any database of natural or artificial sound sources. One engineer, in a note that gets passed around a small circle of researchers before finding its way into wider circulation, describes it as a frequency that appears to be designed for human perception, not incidentally audible to human ears, specifically constructed for them, as if whatever is producing the tone knows exactly who is listening. David is not watching the sky anymore. He is watching the Mount of Olives. And what he sees on the mountain, what he reaches out and grabs his grandson's arm to direct the camera toward, is what every viewer watching the stream in the next 30 seconds will describe as the moment they stopped being uncertain. The crack in the mountain, the one that has been growing all week, the one that revealed the steps, the one that exposed the chamber with the map on its floor. That crack is lit, not from above, not from a light source aimed at it from outside, from within. The light that David saw rising from the chamber at 4 in the morning, visible then only in complete pre-dawn darkness, is now bright enough to be seen against the illuminated night sky, a line of light running east to west across the Mount of Olives. Straight, clean, exact, like a seam, like a line drawn to show where something is about to be opened. The grandson is describing what he sees into the phone for the stream viewers. His voice is steady, lower than usual, the voice of someone who has moved past the point where words feel adequate, but who keeps using them anyway because the alternative is silence, and silence is not what this moment needs. Thousands of miles away, his mother is watching the stream from a house in New Jersey. She has not spoken to her father-in-law in 3 years over a disagreement that seemed important at the time and seems very small right now. She picks up her phone and calls him. He answers on the first ring. Neither of them says anything about the 3 years. They just watch the stream together with the phone open between them. The grandson does not know this is happening, but it is happening all over the world. People calling people they have not called in years. Not because a pastor told them to, not because a program prompted them to, because the sky is doing something that none of the usual social distances and old wounds and habitual disconnections feel relevant against. At 10:44 p.m., the tone changes. The single sustained frequency shifts, not randomly, into something that the acoustic engineers will later describe as harmonic resolution. The way a chord resolves to its root. The way a long tension in music finally arrives at the note it has been moving toward. And with the resolution of the tone, the light above the Mount of Olives shifts too. Takes on definition, not diffuse glow anymore. Shape. A shape that the grandson cannot describe in real time because no combination of words he has available does what he is seeing any justice. But 15,000 viewers watching the stream simultaneously use a word in the comments that he reads aloud without intending to, because it is simply the most accurate word available. Presence. David kneels on the balcony, not from fear, not from weakness, the same way you kneel when you finally meet someone you have been corresponding with your whole life, and the meeting is everything the letters promised. The grandson keeps the camera steady. His hand is not shaking anymore. Something in the quality of the light, something in the frequency of the tone that is still resolving above the city, has passed through every defense he assembled in the years since he drifted away from his grandfather's faith, and reached something underneath all of it that was always there, waiting, the same way the chamber was waiting, the same way the map on the floor was waiting, the same way the number carved in ancient stone beside the door at the center of the network has been waiting since the hands that carved it set down their tools and trusted that someone would eventually descend far enough to read it. The light holds for exactly 7 minutes. David times it. Then it begins to withdraw, not extinguish, withdraw, returning through the opening in the sky the way it came, taking the tone with it, leaving the city, not darker than before, different than before. The way a room is different after someone significant has passed through it. The air changed. The quality of the space changed. The sense that something has occurred that the furniture and walls have registered even if no camera captured it fully. The grandson lowers the phone. The stream is still running. The comments are still flowing. But for the first time in the 6 days he has been documenting this story, he does not know what to say next. His grandfather fills the silence. 23 days, David says. The grandson looks at him. That was day 7 since the crack appeared, which means 23 days remain in the window. 23 days until what? David looks at the Mount of Olives, at the crack that is still faintly lit from below even now that the sky has gone quiet. Until the door at the center opens, he says. And when it opens, he pauses, not for effect, because he is genuinely searching for words that are large enough. When it opens, he says finally, everything that has been underground, Everything that has been waiting in the dark for the right moment comes to the surface. All of it, at once. The grandson raises the phone again, points it at the city spread out below them. The city that, 23 days from now, will look completely different from anything any living person has ever seen. Stay with this, he says to the stream. Whatever you do, stay with this. Monday morning, the governments of the world wake up to something they have no protocol for. Not a military event, not a natural disaster, not a financial crisis or a public health emergency. Something that none of the existing crisis management frameworks, built over decades by people who planned for every category of threat they could imagine, were ever designed to handle. Evidence. Overwhelming, multi-sourced, cross-verified, globally distributed evidence that something outside the boundaries of current scientific understanding is actively occurring, not in one location, not in one tradition, not in one cultural or geographic context. Everywhere, at once. The first official government response comes from an unexpected source. Not a superpower, not a permanent member of the Security Council, a small nation with a long memory and a deep relationship with the geography at the center of all of this. The statement is brief, unusually brief for official diplomatic language. It says, "We have been watching the events of the past 7 days with attention that goes beyond the political. We make no claim about their ultimate meaning. We make only one observation. In our long history, we have seen many things described as signs. Most of them were not. This is different. We recommend that the world pay careful attention to what is happening in Jerusalem, not because we say so, because the evidence demands it." That statement is translated into 47 languages within 3 hours of its release. It is the most shared piece of government communication in the history of social media. The larger governments take longer. The careful institutional language takes more time to construct when the institutions are larger and the political stakes are higher. But by Monday afternoon, the responses are coming. Emergency sessions, extraordinary consultations, classified briefings to senior leadership in a dozen capitals. And underneath all the careful language, in the briefings that will not be declassified for decades, a single consistent question: how do we respond to an event that our frameworks do not account for? The answer, in every briefing room in every capital city, is silence. Because nobody has the answer. Because the frameworks were built by people who, whatever their private beliefs, constructed institutional responses around the assumption that the physical world operates according to fixed and knowable rules. And the physical world, in Jerusalem and Rome and Istanbul and Canterbury and 23 other locations across 14 countries, spent the past 7 days demonstrating that the rules are more flexible than the frameworks assumed. The financial markets open Monday morning to numbers that analysts spend the first 3 hours trying to explain and the following 3 hours simply documenting. Because the movements do not follow any pattern that existing models account for. Not panic selling, not flight to safety. Something that a senior trader at a major institution, speaking off the record to a journalist who has been covering the Jerusalem story since Wednesday, describes as reorientation. It's like watching a compass when a stronger magnetic field enters the room, she says. Everything that was pointing one direction is trying to figure out what to point to now. And the interesting thing is, it's not just the markets. It's the people inside the markets. I've been on this floor for 19 years. I know what fear trading looks like. I know what greed trading looks like. This doesn't look like either of those. This looks like people trying to decide what matters. When something comes along that makes you question the basic assumptions, you stop. Even here, even in the middle of a trading day, you stop and you ask what actually has value. And the answer you come back with is not the same answer you had last week. The hospitals are where the Monday morning story becomes impossible to manage quietly, because hospitals run on documentation, on records, on the systematic tracking of patient status over time, and the documentation from Monday morning in facilities across multiple countries tells a story that the medical establishment will spend months attempting to contextualize. Patients who were not improving are improving, not slowly, not incrementally in the way that treatment protocols produce measurable progress over weeks. Overnight, between Sunday evening observations and Monday morning rounds. Not every patient, not uniformly, but enough, in enough facilities, in enough countries that share no medical protocols, no treatment populations, no common variables. that the WHO issues a quiet advisory by Monday afternoon asking member institutions to submit anomalous recovery data through a dedicated reporting channel. The channel receives more submissions in its first 6 hours than its designers projected it would receive in 6 months. David's grandson spends Monday morning reading the incoming messages on the stream. He stopped trying to respond individually 3 days ago. There are too many, but he reads them, everyone he can get through, because the messages have changed. The early messages, from last week when this was still a story about unusual events in Jerusalem, were questions, requests for clarification, skeptical challenges, excited speculation. The messages coming in now are different. They are not questions. They are accounts, person after person, country after country, background after background, all describing the same thing in different language. A shift, something changing inside them that they cannot attribute to any external cause. A reordering of priorities that happened not because of a decision they made, but because something came through the sky on Sunday night and the world looked different in the morning. A woman in South Korea writes, "I have been angry at my sister for 11 years. I woke up Monday morning and the anger was gone. Not suppressed. Gone. Like it was taken." A man in Brazil writes, "I am not a believer. I want to say that clearly. But something happened to me Sunday night that I cannot explain, and Monday morning I found myself doing something I have not done since childhood. I prayed. I don't know who I was praying to. I just knew I needed to." A teenager in Nigeria writes, "My grandfather has been sick for 2 years. Monday morning, he asked for breakfast. The doctors have no explanation. He is asking for breakfast and singing songs from his childhood, and my grandmother is crying, and I am watching your stream, and I need someone to tell me what is happening." David reads the messages over his grandson's shoulder. He does not comment on most of them, but when he reaches the one from the teenager in Nigeria, he puts his hand on his grandson's shoulder. Keeps it there. Does not say anything. Does not need to. 22 days remain in the window. The door at the center of the underground network has not opened yet. What happens when it does? What the ancient inscription describes as following that opening is something that the emergency religious meetings and the government briefings and the WHO advisory and the financial market reorientation are all circling around without naming directly, because naming it directly requires a commitment to the possibility that the world is not what most of its institutions were built to manage, that the rules are not the rules, that the door at the center of a network carved into stone 2,000 years ago opens onto something that every human being who has ever lived, in every culture, every era, every tradition, has always known was there, even the ones who spent their whole lives insisting it wasn't. David closes the notebook on Monday evening. The first time in 7 days he has closed it before midnight. His grandson asks why. "Because the documenting part is almost finished," David says. "What comes next?" He looks at the Mount of Olives visible through the apartment window, at the faint light still rising from the crack in the stone. What comes next doesn't need documentation. It needs witnesses. People who were paying attention from the beginning. People who know the full sequence. People who can stand in the middle of what's coming and say, "We knew. We watched. We were here." He looks at his grandson. "That's why you came," he says. "That's why the phone rang at 3 in the morning. Not to document the signs. To be ready for what the signs were pointing toward. 22 days. The door is still closed, but the light coming through the crack is getting brighter every night. And tomorrow, something will happen on that mountain that no one who has been watching this story from the beginning will be able to look away from." Tuesday, before dawn, David is on the path. 22 days left in the window. The crack is the widest it has been. The light from below is the brightest it has been. The stone steps descending into the chamber are now clear all the way down. The water that covered the lower steps has fully receded. The map on the floor is completely exposed, and the door marking at the center, the one with the number 30 carved beside it, has changed. David kneels at the edge of the crack and looks down. The number 30 is still there, but beside it, carved in the same ancient hand, is something that was not visible when the water was present, something that the receding water has revealed overnight. A second number, not a countdown from 30, not a measurement, a date, carved in a calendar notation that the seminary student, contacted by the grandson at 5:43 a.m., identifies within 20 minutes. It corresponds, exactly, to a date that is 22 days from today, a date that appears in 3 separate ancient prophetic texts. from 3 separate traditions. As the day the final sequence begins, not ends, begins. Professor Marsh receives the photograph of the second number at 6 a.m. He is already awake. He looks at it for a long time. Then he calls Dr. Okafor. She answers before the second ring. "You've seen it," he says. "Yes." The date matches. "It matches all 3 texts," she says. "Not approximately. Exactly. Alan, whoever carved this floor knew this date 2,000 years before our calendar arrived at it." Marsh does not respond immediately. "That's not the part that concerns me," Dr. Okafor says. "What concerns you?" "The second inscription. Beside the date." Marsh looks at the photograph again. The second inscription. For words in ancient Hebrew that the seminary student translated in the same message he used to identify the calendar notation. For words that David's grandson read aloud to his grandfather at 5:51 a.m. while standing at the edge of the crack in the early morning dark. For words that made David close his notebook for the second time. Close it, set it on the stone, and stand up very straight. The way a man stands when he understands that the moment he has been preparing for his whole life is no longer approaching. "It's here," Marsh says finally. "Yes," says Dr. Okafor. "That's what it says." The 4 words. In their most direct translation from ancient Hebrew into modern English. The door opens now. Not in 22 days. Not at the end of the 30-day window. Now, the countdown was not to the opening. The countdown was to the preparation completing. And the preparation. 7 days of water and light and open chambers and global phenomena and hospitals emptying and old wounds healing and a sky full of something that has no name in any scientific catalog. The preparation is complete. The door at the center of the network beneath the Mount of Olives was already opening while everyone was watching the clock. David's grandson is filming when it happens. 6:14 a.m. Jerusalem time. The ground does not shake. There is no dramatic seismic event. No collapse of stone. No violence of any kind. The mountain simply opens. The way a door opens when the person on the other side has decided it is time. Quietly. Completely. With the unhurried certainty of something that was always going to happen and has simply arrived at its moment. The light that comes through is not like Sunday night's light. Sunday night's light was a signal. This light is a presence. The grandson holds the camera steady. 37,000 people are watching the stream live. The comments stop. All of them. For 19 seconds, 37,000 people watch in complete silence. And then, the stream cuts out. Not from a platform restriction. Not from a technical failure. The phone, which has maintained full battery through 8 days of continuous filming, goes dark. The grandson looks at the screen. Looks at his grandfather. David is not looking at the phone. He is not looking at the mountain. He is looking at something that the camera, even if it had been running, could not have captured. Something that has no frame wide enough to contain it. Something that has been on its way for 2,000 years and has just arrived. He turns to his grandson. And for the first time in 8 days of the most extraordinary sequence of events either of them has witnessed, David smiles. Not the careful smile of a man managing his emotions. The full smile. The one his wife used to say could light a room without electricity. "Michael," he says. It is the first time in the entire story he has used his grandson's name. "Look up." The grandson looks up. And what he sees above the Mount of Olives. What is descending through the opening that the light came through? What is walking the stone path that appeared overnight 8 days ago? That is where the words end. Not because the story is over. Because some things that are real are larger than any language built to describe them. And the world that wakes up tomorrow morning will not be the same world that went to sleep last night. 22 days were never the end of the story. They were the last page of the introduction. What comes next has no last page. The stream came back online 11 minutes later. What it showed is the subject of the next video. If you're still watching, you already know you'll be there.